Tim, I thought you were gonna walk away and come back with a costume on.
I am wearing a costume.
What are you supposed to be, Tim?
You know how all the Cerna polos are like dark blue?
Yeah.
I'm a 2016 Cerna polo. Classic blue color is.
No, you're right. It's so retro.
Jeff, you ready?
Anyways, can they see us yet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you started the
Like,
broadcast.
like half an hour now.
I've been sitting here out of costume. I'm so embarrassed.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining the Cerna Podcast Live episode 4. We are talking about spooky ServiceNow problems and how to solve them. I am joined by our distinguished guests of panelists. I'll go ahead and let everyone introduce themselves. Yeah, we'll do that right now. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Hey, I'm Jeff Pierce. You've seen me before on these, I'm sure. Maybe not. I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii, and this is my Halloween costume today. I'm not going to wear this the whole time. Don't worry. We have the Service Portal Practice Manager here at Cerna, and yeah, I'm excited to be here today again on another Cerna Podcast Live.
Hey, Jeff, where are you from? We'll do this. Let's go around. Say where you're from. You've already said what you do. And what was one of the worst Halloween costumes you can remember?
So I live in Honolulu, Hawaii, and yeah, I was the Portal Practice Manager, and I forgot we were broadcast, so you may have actually already seen this, but the worst costume was last year, and I was a fox, and I did the makeup and everything, and that's me there. Don't get any ideas. And it was just hot and sweaty, and that paint was melting all over. I was like an evil fox on a bad acid trip by the end of the night. And so
We've
be
all
careful
been.
with face paint and warm climates.
Yeah, that's good advice. All right, Kerry, same questions.
Hi. Okay. I'm Carrie Padian. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon, though right now I'm in San Diego on site. I'm the senior technical consultant, and my worst Halloween, honestly, the worst thing about this is that I can only remember like 3 Halloween costumes that I've ever worn, which is, I know that every year I have a new one, but it's gone now. So I'm old, my brain is empty, it's terrible. But I don't know. One of the worst ones that I can remember is just one of those old plastic ones. When I was a kid, I don't even know if they sell them anymore, but they have the rigid like plastic mask with the tiny little eyes cut out and the tiny little mouth so you can breathe. You get like this tiny little bit to breathe, and it just smells terrible in there. And yeah. So
What was it? What was the character?
it was Raggedy Ann, but I think I also had a Barbie one, like if I remember correctly. So and maybe a gem holograms.
Yeah, I remember that smell. I remember having those masks, the like styrene masks that were form fit, and you put them on with the little elastic, and then you had a smock that just said the name
Like
of
the
the person.
elastic band would always like break, and then you're like holding this mask on your face, and it was just very scary.
And the elastic band was always stapled to the mask, so you
Yeah.
had like this staple digging into your temple.
Staple in your face.
Yeah.
That's exactly. All right, and last but not least, Meg, where are you from? What do you do? And what was your worst Halloween costume?
Sure. Hi, I'm Meg Hosty. I'm an engagement manager here at Cerna. I currently live in Louisville, Colorado. It's just outside of Boulder. And my worst Halloween costume was probably when I was a kid. It was when my mom decided to be really crafty one Halloween and create pumpkin costumes for the fam that had to be stuffed with like paper to make you too big to walk through doorways. She tried to load all of us up in the car to go to a party and had to de-stuff us to shove us in the car. So I hated that costume. I felt like it was waddling everywhere.
All right, I just got a question from someone saying that they were not able to see video right now. If I could get some confirmation from someone else who's attending, you should be able to see my screen as well as 4 faces. Okay, it seems like some people are. If you're not seeing the video, I apologize for that. You should be able to, but okay, great. Everyone is confirming that sound is good. I apologize for that little break there. If you're not getting a video, we will be sending out a recording of this event. That's actually one of the questions that we normally get. Is this being recorded? Obviously it is. This is a podcast. So we are going to be putting this on our YouTube channel, on our website, cernasolutions.com. If you want to get updates about what we're doing, obviously go to our LinkedIn page for Cerna Solutions. That's where you'll see a lot of these updates. And most likely, if you want to register for future webinars and future podcasts, that's a great place for you to take a look. I won't skip myself this time. I'm Tim Leigh. I'm the host of the Cerna Podcast Live podcast. I'm out of Chicago, Illinois. My first Halloween costume was when it wasn't a bad costume. It was made very well. Now that I'm a parent, I know what it's like to make a costume for your child. My mom put a lot of love into this costume where I was dressed as Robin from Batman and Robin, and it was made out of felt. And my friend, he made his own costume out of duct tape, and it was waterproof and strong. And mine was well made, but it rained, and so when I got home and changed into my clothes, I was still wearing my Robin costume underneath because the felt had bled through, uh, and I'm still wearing it today. So that was just last year.
Nice.
No, no, I was like 6. It was really good. I had a lot of fun that Halloween. I remember it vividly. All right, so let's get started, guys. First thing I want to do is what we're going to be talking about today. We had a few topics that we had in mind that we would like to cover: overcoming a haunted agile release, waking up from a nightmarish update set migration. We're going to do a live demo with Jeff where he's going to show us how to free a possessed service portal widget. But we also want to get your questions and comments as well. We actually received a lot of them when we had posted that up on the registration. If you have any problems that you'd like us to cover, many of you guys asked us a lot of questions, so much so we won't be able to hit every single one of them. But don't let that stop you from asking questions now. If you have a question in your head, something you would like to hear us cover either today or on a future podcast or a future webinar, please let us know, and we'll try to cover as many of those as we possibly can. But without much further ado, let's get started. I want to talk about overcoming a haunted agile release. And I'm going to throw this to the group. I'm actually going to see Meg first. You being in our engagement manager role, I want to hear a little bit more about what are some of the haunted agile releases you've seen, and what what are some common problems that people are seeing here?
Sure. So some of what I've seen is related to a lack of communication around what's going to be included in a release, and really having a common understanding between the client as well as our team, as to stories that might be related that need to be pushed together in a release, planning appropriate resources to ensure that testing's accounted for prior to the release being moved. So it's more around planning and understanding that you're operating with the same understanding.
So how do you
Sure.
define the definition of done?
That's something that needs to be determined with the client. It's a great conversation to be had when you kick off the project and talk through release planning. What is the definition of done for them, so that we get their final stamp of approval.
I imagine that is kind of a problem. I mean, if you go into a project and just list a number of goals, but don't really define what that outcome looks like. I mean, what does that look like? What are some of the problems from not defining that?
Go ahead, Jeff. I'll let you jump in on that one.
When you have this wildly fraying string at the end, right? It started off nice and cohesive, tightly braided, but then you just have requirements going in all directions, and you lose focus of prioritization, right? So definition of done, I think that's a really kind of a weird one to try to explain. Like, what is that? What form does it come in? Is it that like 2 sentences that describe the grand vision of a minimum viable product, or is it actually a collection of themes and epics and critical use cases? I don't want to get down to stories, because stories shouldn't define the definition of done, right? Because that's where we talk about it like really kind of going haywire. But I think that you can't underestimate the value of defining the minimum viable product. Here's what it just has to be able to do for us to be able to use it, right? Otherwise, we know that you'll enhance it to the end of Kingdom Come. We know that's going to happen, so definition of done isn't done, what I want it to be 5 years from now. It's like, what does it have to be to just ship something today, or as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And Jeff, I've heard you talk before about that. Each sprint should be defined by a shippable product, right? Having that very specific
Potentially,
idea there.
yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
Can you define that a little bit better and just kind of talk a little bit more about what you mean by a shippable product?
Yeah, so a potentially shippable product means it might not be a complete product, but it has some subset of functionality that is fully operational. So like, I come from the portal world, so a potentially shippable portal product at the end of one sprint may just include search, right? You can search for stuff and you get a nice search results page, and we get all the proper results in it, right? That's a potentially shippable product. And it's a small enough bite for us to say, all right, we can do this in one sprint. We can build this from start to finish. Right? It's portal's not done, but you have a potentially shippable piece of it. So the idea is like, we don't want to just do everything at once, start everything at once, and then throughout all the sprints, we've got like we're getting closer to a potentially shippable product. And it's good to chunk, right? Chunk the functionality, finish it. Does it work well? Now let's move on to another piece of functionality. So that's kind of what I.
And I think
how I feel.
off of that, when you were saying we don't want to start everything at once and finish it at once, I think that's also can be a common issue if clients are coming from only operating under a waterfall approach versus an agile approach. I think it's a shift in mentality of, that's what a lot of people are used to and how they execute projects. And so it is a shift to be completing smaller pieces of the whole and then moving those as they're complete or defined as done, and not waiting for everything to be complete and done before things are shipped.
I agree. And then part of that is also defining what you're going to do when you hit a roadblock. Like, for instance, you finish a story and then discover something else attached to that story that needs to be done that we didn't, document ahead of time. What do? Do we then create a new story? Do we edit this story and reopen it? You need to have a plan in place. Otherwise, some of these stories are just sort of going to die on the vine, and then you don't get to your end goal.
Yep. And also, let's not pretend this is the only agile project we're ever going to do, right? Like, we're never going to have lessons to learn. So part of the reason why we get so meticulous with stories and writing new stories and being organized is so that we can look back at our past projects and be like, how far off were we? We wrote one set of stories as the product backlog, but we ended up with twice as many stories. So now we know going into the next one, all right, if we only have 10 stories, those probably need to be broken down into more stories. Because remember the last time we needed twice as many, and also pointing too. We understand the effort that is the more realistic effort of all these things when we have this history of well-documented tasks that we've done, and we're able to see how wrong we were with them. So that's being detailed about about stories, and specifically, like you said, Carrie, creating new ones. Like, don't be so attached to one story that we keep changing it over and over and like adding acceptance criteria. Just close and be like, obviously we have new requirements now, right? Close this one. Let's open up a new one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, you just mentioned kind of doing a post-mortem when you're maybe at the end of the release. I think that's so important, and so many people just sort of skip over that step. They're like, well, it's done, it's fine, let's move on. But really, even just a meeting, sit down, what worked, what didn't, what can we do better next time? You're going to be hopefully using the same process repeatedly, and so you want to keep improving it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Meg, you talked a little bit about how waterfall and agile can kind of run into each other a little bit. And I
Mhm.
think we talked a little bit about Wagile or even fake Agile that some ServiceNow projects seem to adopt.
Yeah.
How have you seen that affect, ServiceNow projects specifically?
I've seen it. Again, it's defining from the start of the project what the approach is going to be. Because if it's not defined between both parties, it can cause a great deal of confusion. It could delay timelines, delay releases, and it can also result in not securing the right resources at the right time to perform testing. And yeah, I'd say confusion would be the word I would use to define it. There's no right or wrong approach. I mean, I think you have to start with clients where they're at and move forward. Not everyone's ready to jump into Agile. It doesn't always fit with their culture. So it's a slow shift in getting everyone on board. Um, Carrie, we left you in the dark over
Carrie,
there.
are you you have Halloween lighting?
Spooky.
um, but
There we
yeah,
go.
so I mean, I think it's just about clearly defining, what the approach is going to be. I know when we start our agile projects with clients and we start talking through that, we even go through just what's our backlog grooming going to be, what's our sprint planning look like, what are the different steps that we're going to take, and that way we can prepare the right resources at the right time throughout the project to keep us keep us on track and on time and being able to adjust if we need to.
Yeah. I would add to that, one of the greatest qualities that the product owner can have is the willingness to to accept that not everything is critical, right? There are different priorities of requirements, all the way from very low to very critical. And if everything is critical, you're just not in reality.
Nothing is.
You need to have a pretty good distribution of your spread of priorities, right?
Yes.
Because you need to be able to get to the end of a planned release and say, okay, we didn't do everything, but we did the stuff that was truly most important first. And now, yeah, maybe I can't sort my list by popularity. Maybe I can't like do this little extra thing, that we really want to be able to do. Doesn't mean we're not going to be able to ever do it. It means that this release is finished and it wasn't included in this release. We'll do it in the next release, right?
Hmm.
So, there has to be that discipline to understand we don't have to do everything right now.
Right.
Right. We're doing a major disservice to your customers when you're like holding back what could be a very good tool just because it doesn't
Yeah.
have everything in it. Right. We can't underestimate our customers that, their willingness to use an in progress tool. And we know we're going to change the tool anyways, according to how they end up using it anyhow. So it's just this mindset to get in that like we're fooling ourselves to think that it's all going to be done in one go, in one release.
Okay. Well, let's do this right now. Let's kind of move over to the next topic at this point. And Carrie, I'm going to throw this to you. I know that recently you had actually written some content for us on the website about some update set migration issues that you think that people may be having. Can you tell me, maybe paint me a picture of some of the nightmarish situations you've had with an update set migration?
Yeah, when I first started consulting with ServiceNow, this was pretty much the scariest part of any implementation, because you've done all this work and you think it's ready to go, and then you push your update sets, and then ServiceNow throws a handful of scary looking errors at you. So I remember plenty of like sweating, freaking out, panicking moments when reading this, like, it didn't work, I don't know what to do. And so basically, I think the most important thing, if your update set is kind of blowing up at you, is to take a step back, take a deep breath, and don't panic, because I've never actually come across an update set error that we couldn't fix. So there are things that you can do. A lot of common issues that you might see, you'll see maybe the file is missing, some file that ServiceNow thinks that it's a record that it's going to find when it installs this update set. It can't find it. But you'll notice if you look to the right when you're looking at your list of errors that there are usually some helpful actions that you can take, links that you can click on that will sort of get you more information. So if you get the one that says basically, file not found, record not found, there's a link that you can click to the right that will say, okay, let's go back and find this record in the development instance and see if we can figure out why that happened. And so if you click on that, it'll take you back. 9 times out of 10, it'll say record not found in the development instance, and then it's probably something that you deleted on purpose, and there's no need to freak out. So sort of step through each one like that. Take it as it comes. Look for any clues that ServiceNow is giving you, any actions that you can take. For instance, if you're getting an error that says that the thing that you're trying to push is an older version compared to the one that's coming in, there's found a newer version of this thing, just click on the link that says compare these versions and then look at it and see what the differences are and then make your educated decision about which one to keep. So there's no need to freak out. There are plenty of things that can be done. Worst case scenario, you can back it out and then try it again. Repush it from dev. So what else? I think there's another one that I get sometimes when you have multiple update sets that are working with the same thing. Sometimes if you push them all at once, ServiceNow gets confused and it's like, I'm not really sure if I'm supposed to push this update or that update. Usually the best idea to do that if you've got multiple update sets on the same thing is to merge them together when you're in the dev instance and then push that merged set. Because that process of merging is kind of telling ServiceNow, okay, look at all of these updates, you organize them, you figure out where they're supposed to go, and then you put them in a set for me. And then when you push that, usually you have a lot fewer issues. So anyway, just don't panic. That's my big thing.
So Kerry, are you familiar with the Kool-Aid Man method?
I can guess, but tell me more.
Well, I recently had it was a big custom application and custom service portal that went along with it. And the application actually originated in a ServiceNow demo instance, and which was then moved to a client demo instance. And now I had to take what was started, put it in their actual dev instance, build on top of it, everything. So when it finally came time to push their test instance, literally had just hundreds of errors, just all over the place. And just, doing all the methods that you talked about, just could not figure out why, these errors were there. So did the Kool-Aid Man method, where you just select all, accept, and you just you watch that wall, you're just gonna burst into the test instance and we're gonna see where it all falls. And then just apply a corrective update set.
Yikes.
You patch up the wall afterwards, right? What do you think about that? What
I'm
do you
really
do?
worried. I'm a little worried that someone's going to try that and have problems. And it's like, Cerna Solutions told me to do the Kool-Aid Man method.
So I'm not recommending the Kool-Aid Man method, and to say
Right.
we all know that it exists. And what could I have considered or maybe done rather than the Kool-Aid method?
I think the Kool-Aid Man method, while not recommended, is it's a valid way to go. The thing that you need to keep in mind is that on the back of all of those, just apply it and push it through and see what happens, is that you have to actually go and see what happens. So you have to then step through every single thing that you have built and make sure that it is all exactly the way it's supposed to be, and maybe make a list of all the things that aren't, and then, like you said, corrective update set, so go back to dev then and fix all of those things and then push another update set to fix them. Yeah. That may be the way to go if you're looking at hundreds of errors and you just can't untangle them. That's
I would imagine that just accepting everything like that, which again is a choice, it's a way to go, I'm sure, is a great way to get a lot of ghosts in your ServiceNow instance, where a year down the line you've got something that you pushed through, maybe you didn't test thoroughly, and now you've got this skeleton in your closet, so to speak, that you have to now deal with later on.
So that's the thing, is that
welcome to the Halloween episode, everyone, for everyone who's joining.
Sorry. Most people don't have the patience for that kind of testing. So you really have to be honest with yourself. Like, are you going to go through and do all of that testing and be meticulous? And if you're not, then maybe you need to step back and figure out another way to do that, because otherwise you will sort of endanger your instance for the future if you're just throwing stuff into it that you don't know whether it's going to work.
When documentation makes a huge difference too. If you're just documenting everything you do as you go and the order that you move things in, that can really, really help keep your head straight.
Definitely.
Well, I think that, Carrie, going back to something that you said about how there are solutions for it, right? I think that when you do an update set migration and it gives you an error and you're thinking, oh no, how do I handle this? There's got to be community resources that you guys have access to. Obviously, ServiceNow has a ton of resources for people. What do you recommend for someone trying to troubleshoot that? Where's kind of your first go-to to figure out how to solve that error?
I mean, I guess the first thing I would do is look at what errors I'm getting. A lot of times, even if you get hundreds of errors, there's only so many different kinds of errors that you're going to get. And so say half of the errors are there's a file missing, a record missing type, then you can sort of take that information and go back to your original instance and figure out why that has happened. Do the same thing you would do if you just had like 3 or 4 errors. Click the link, see if you can figure out where those records went. Do that for a handful of those errors until you get an idea of where those problems are coming from, and then maybe you can take a bigger action that will fix more of them at once. So I guess my point is just don't get overwhelmed. Take it a little bit at a time and see if you can get to the bottom of what's really happening.
Uh-oh. Did Carrie freeze for everybody else?
You did.
Yeah, she froze.
Oh no.
Lights going off over there, and now she's frozen. She's in a haunted office for sure.
So we've lost Carrie momentarily. I think she got her point across, and it's fun.
Yeah.
It's really fun that she's frozen like this.
Uh-huh.
But for right now, hey guys, let's get to the next topic for us, which is going to be presented by Jeff, and you're going to tell us how to work with a possessed service portal widget.
Yeah, so we certainly don't have time here to go into all the troubleshooting techniques that we could employ, but I'm going to cover just a few common things that you run into that, just very fundamental things to know to look for that could save you a lot of trouble, depending on what you're trying to do. So the first one is, say that you're putting a widget on a page, you're developing a custom portal, and so you may have seen the page designer view. So this gives you a view of your service portal page that shows the layout, what containers and columns are on the page, and then what widget instances you have in those. And now, first thing just to be aware of is this can take a really long time to load sometimes, and so just be patient. But even when it does load, what you might find is you just have these empty containers. Now, we don't see an issue right here. All the widgets on the page are visible with their little previews. But when you start doing custom development, you might find some empty ones here. And it can be really confusing whether or not you actually put something on the page. So really one of the really most fundamental concepts of Service Portal to understand is that when you drop a widget on the page, you're actually putting an instance of that widget on the page, right? The widget is just kind of like this master file, this archetype of code and template that is referenced. So when you drop something on the page, you're going to get a record in this widget instances table. So we can see here, these are all instances of widgets that I've dropped on different pages throughout in different portals in this instance. And when we take a look at this record, we can see, depending on what type of widget it is, you'll have different types of options, but you'll want to take, just pay close attention to this. Maybe you have some corrupted options in there, or you can edit your options for the widget instance manually. So this tells you actually which widget is being used to render the instance. So I'm not going to go a whole lot more into the concept of widget instances. Just to understand that they're there. And if you need to troubleshoot this, hey, where is my widget? Is it even on the page? That's one of the first places you can check is the widget instances. Now, the next thing that I would do if I put a widget on a page and it's just not showing up, is I would use my Elements Inspector. So if you're not familiar with the Elements Inspector, most modern browsers have a version of this. I like Chrome's because it's easy to get around in. It's just become very familiar to me and gives me everything I need. So I like to use this one. You can see when you open it up, so you just right-click anywhere on the page, and ideally you're right-clicking on an element that you want to inspect. So, for example, let's do my favorites up here, inspect. So here in the Elements panel, I see the HTML for the page, right? This is the backbone of the page's structure. So I can see what's actually getting rendered. Then I can see all the styles, so all the CSS that's getting applied to it as well, and I can explore all that, and I can manipulate it right here in the browser to see how different changes take different effects. But if you're looking for the widget itself, and there's nothing in the widget, you're going to want to be looking for an element. So it's a div element, and it'll have the attribute of widget right here. So this is the parent element for a widget. And this just happens to be the header widget, right? If I go and look down at this one, the search, see I found this div that has the attribute widget. So this is my search widget, right? So I can learn a lot by inspecting that then. Did anything get rendered inside, or did it not? Now I can also learn a lot about the scope of this widget. So what has been configured for it, what type of data is supporting it. And actually to do that, let's take, we'll go back and take a look at the header widget. Actually, no, I'm gonna go to the Manage My Favorites page, and we'll do it from there. So, now looking at any widget, I can do Control click, and I have access to the Service Portal menu. And see these at the bottom here, log to console, scope.data, and scope. So this will allow me to log to the console in the Elements Inspector. So you can see now I'm on the console. It just created this, and I can view the data object of what I just clicked on. So this is the widget, and I can see in my data object I have 5 items, which are the actual favorited items here, and it tells me all the information about each item. You know, everything that this is used to configure the link, to display the image and the label. So now I can also do the entire scope of the widget. And so instead of just the data object, I actually see all the options and dependencies and everything for the entire widget. Now you may want to even look further, right? There's a lot of scope to the entire portal application that doesn't have anything to do with widgets. So for example, we have some data objects in the portal scope that tell us about what page we're on, that tell us all about the user who is logged in. So there's some really valuable information that's already stored there in our application. And in order to get to that, you're going to need a Chrome extension. I like this one. It's called ngInspect. There are a couple of other ones out there that are similarly worded, but look for this one, ng-inspect. And what this does, it gives you an extension to your Elements Inspector. So if I'm back on the Elements tab here, and I select, say, this widget. Now you see I have this tab down here in the styles, where the same panel where the styles are. I click on AngularJS, and now I can drill in to the entire scope of not just this widget, right? So this widget here's the data object that we were just looking at previously, the different items, but I also have access to the root scope of the application. So that has really interesting stuff in it that could be very useful to you. So for example, here's the page object that has everything I could want to know about the page that I'm on. The portal, here's the user object. Where did that go? I just lost it. User, here it is. Uh-oh. I just got a...
Oh no.
Looks like he's frozen now.
Oh no.
Are we sure this webinar isn't haunted?
This seems to be the fact that he said uh-oh and then just froze was
Oh
a
no.
little perfect.
Ta-da!
Hey, Jeff, you're back. I'm going to make you presenter again so you can finish up your presentation.
Okay. Yeah, I think I left off as I was trying to explore the user object, maybe. That sound
Yes.
familiar? All right.
Sure.
Okay. All right. All right. So yeah, not a whole lot more I want to show about that because I imagine that can get pretty boring if you're not really into it. But just so you know that this is there with that extension, you have full access into the scope of your application, and I use that constantly when I'm developing, right? Because you want to know what data is behind here, especially when you get into some more sophisticated functionality. Just one other thing I wanted to bring up about Service Portal is, say you're developing your styles, right? You're doing the CSS, you want to make this look pretty. So there's really two main ways of bringing styles into your portal. One is right in the widget editor, right? Your widget has a CSS field where you can write CSS in there. And this is a real ideal place because this CSS is limited to the scope of this widget, right? So whatever, so for example, if I were to say, I want every div to have a blue background, this isn't going to apply to every div in my entire portal, only the divs in this HTML template, right? So that's really nice. Then also, I can make use of the Sass, right? So I can define using the branding editor all the default colors for the portal, and then I can create variables for them. So right, so I can define an actual hex value of a color to the variable brand primary, and then use that throughout the CSS in my widgets. But now here's a spot where it might throw you off the rails. The other place you can define your CSS is in the actual CSS style sheets that get attached in your theme. These are nice because this is where you can define more global styles that affect all widgets across the board. But two things to be aware of here is, and I believe as of London still, you still can't use Sass, meaning those Sass variables that I defined to make maintenance of all my color values and stuff very easy. You can't use those in the style sheets. It's just not going to work. One other thing you need to know is when you do make changes to a style sheet here, in order to see the results, you're going to have to do a hard refresh of your browser. So just do a hard reload, and that will refresh your style sheet. Otherwise, you're not going to see the changes. All right, so that's those are just a few things that I wanted to bring up that I think are pretty fundamental for anybody starting with Service Portal to be aware of, just so that you don't spend hours banging your head against the wall. So those are some of the things that I first had major challenges with when I started developing.
All right, great. What I want to do, since we have a little bit of time left, I want to show some questions right now, or take some of the questions from who we've been, some of our attendees have submitted questions. Let me get back to the page. Sorry, guys. And I want to make sure that we definitely approach some of those and answer those for some people. One person asked a great question. They want to define customization with respect to how it impacts out of the box. And I think the context there is that they hear a consistent message of use ServiceNow out of the box, don't customize as much as possible. And for a lot of people, there can be some question as to when is it valuable to stay within the box? When is it valuable to customize, and how do you draw that line?
I can start on that. You hear me okay? I was chopping up a little bit there. Am I okay?
Yeah, you're good now.
We can
Okay.
hear you now.
Yeah. Right. So I tend to abide by that, right? Don't customize things that you don't absolutely have to, and even then, you better have a really good justification for it and do it in a way that's a best practice. So I think first rule is, if you can, never modify a file that was actually created by ServiceNow. If you can, create a copy of that one and then reference that new one instead. So like leave ServiceNow preserved as you found it, like a museum you could walk into 100 years later and be like, oh, here's the original incident this incident events business rule, right? It's exactly as it was when we got it. So create new stuff that's copies of all the old stuff. So that's one thing. That's going to, I think, save you a lot of trouble. But then two is like, okay, so say we can make a copy of it. Should we make a copy of it? Why recreate this functionality or customize it? Yeah, because you've got things like, just say for example, here's an example back from the CMS days. And this kind of addresses a question that I saw on a list too from somebody, is, when CMS, you still had to use the regular form renderer for catalog items, and you had to put that in an iframe, and that's how you displayed it, right? So even if you were using a really nicely designed portal, when you got to a catalog item, you still had the fields being displayed in the same way that they are, for every other ServiceNow user, the default UI. And so I faced that question many times: is, do we rebuild this? Do we rebuild the UI page that renders all these different field types, the calendar picker, drop downs, stuff, and bring it into modern UX? And the answer for me was always no, because it was just too complicated. ServiceNow already spent, if ServiceNow already spent hundreds of hours designing one little piece of functionality, you can bet that if you're going to do any kind of comparable job or improve on it, it's going to take you just as long, if not longer.
Yeah.
Right. So the pieces of ServiceNow that are already complex, already work in a very specific way to deliver, a decent UX or UI, just leave them alone and don't bother trying to replicate it, unless you've got to have a major use case and justification for doing it.
Yeah, I want to talk for just a second. Sorry.
Of course, Kerry, go ahead.
The question of customization is one of balance. You have to think about, is this going to make it easier for people to use our system? And then can we weigh that against having to keep people on staff who know how this works and can fix it if it breaks, right? And so if it's only going to make it a little bit easier, but then you have to keep a lot of people around to be able to support it, then maybe that's not worth it to do. So really keeping it as close to out of the box as possible is about reducing the number of specialized people you need to be able to support your own instance, and that's a big question.
Well, I think that one of the big dangers for over customization that we see is having to re-implement. That's sort of the big. That was honestly, re-implementation was going to be our Halloween theme in planning.
Too scary.
And I couldn't get anyone who wanted to talk about it, because if you over customize and you get to a point where no one can keep up with it, can maintain it, there are right ways to do it. There's a best practices, right? There's a right way to make sure that you are customizing in a way that you can support it, right? Would you agree? I'm less technical than everyone else on this panel, so I want to verify that.
Well, documentation again is another important point there. So if you're going to customize, you have to also document like crazy, so that someone can come in, look at your documentation and figure out what the heck is going on. Otherwise, you're talking about days, weeks, potentially, of someone trying to untangle what you've built.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not worth it. It's too expensive.
Yeah. And part of that documentation should include a fallback plan too, right? You know, should we ever need to fall back to out of the box functionality, here's what we would need to do.
Yeah, how are we going to do that? Exactly.
I want to get to some other questions. First, I want to call out a couple people who made some comments, a few great comments that we got. I won't say everyone's name. You'll know if you said it, but I like the one that said Kerry was replaced with a clone, and now this is back when Jeff froze, and now when Jeff comes back, he won't really beat Jeff. And then someone else had commented the uh-oh and then freeze was totally awesome because Jeff, you went uh-oh. And then you were gone. And every time I saw that comment, go back and watch this video. I was biting my lip for like 10 minutes after that person made that comment, so I wouldn't laugh audibly. But I want to talk real quick. And Jeff, honestly, the funny thing is, you covered a lot of questions that we already had. I know you read, but I want to get a couple more in here. Carrie, someone had asked us for some other general troubleshooting techniques. Do you guys have your own, just real quick, kind of lightning round version of what are the best troubleshooting techniques that you like to employ in a ServiceNow project?
Boy, I mean, the first one is make sure that you can reproduce the issue, right? And then figure out if you can control parts of it. So gosh, yeah, this could get really complicated really fast. But if you can't make it happen again, it's not a problem. So you can be like, sorry, it's fine now.
But that's like when I take my car to the mechanic, right? I mean, I'll take my car there and I'll be like, it's bumping, it's making sounds, and then they take it for a drive and they go, sorry. And like, what do you? I guess that's a good question. What do you do when you can't reproduce it? I mean, do you just have to live like it's fine?
I mean, you want to go back to the client and see if they can reproduce it, right? Because whoever's reporting the issue, you want to take them seriously, believe them, right? If they're having a problem, and maybe have them show you. Because sometimes from a support side, sometimes you're doing it as yourself. You're not trying it as like using their account. So maybe you have different results than they will get. So yeah, definitely go back to who's reporting the issue, have them show you the issue, and then see if you can reproduce it, and then sort of filter out what the factors might be that are it got dark again that are causing that.
Yeah, I think it's good to always have the mindset. When somebody reports a defect, we have to kind of have the mindset to believe them. We're like, okay, something is wrong, right? It might not be what they think it is, but they're experiencing something. So I always like to go to the source as soon as possible. Like even before trying to reproduce it myself, that just always, can you provide me screenshots? Be sure to tell me what browser you're using, what type of device you're using. So those are all important things to know early before you kind of waste your time hunting down a defect. I like to get those details.
Yeah.
Hey Jeff, I got a question from someone that said they were wondering how you copy a service portal.
Or you copy a service portal. Well, you can clone pages, you can clone widgets, you can clone a portal record. But see, the unique thing about Service Portal is that you don't have pages tied to a specific portal. A portal just provides a directory and a theme that it applies to whatever pages you navigate to. There's no way to say take this one subset of pages and everything on them and clone them. You'll have to do each page individually, right? Because you might have multiple portals that use the same page, right? So in that sense, you don't really have a portal to clone, except maybe at the highest level, where you define what the home page is, what your theme is, stuff like that. So I don't think cloning a portal actually really has that much of a practical usage.
Okay. Well, you know what, guys? I'd love to get to actually, we're seeing some more questions even coming in now, but we're going to have to get to them a little bit later, guys. I do apologize. We are past our time. I want to, again, thank our panel, Jeff, Carrie, Meg. Next time, our podcast will be about what to do when nothing goes right in your podcast and how to safeguard your technology while you're on a live performance. Jeff, everyone, oh, Meg, you took your Halloween costume off.
I was scratching my nose.
I just noticed. All right. Well, everyone, thank you again for joining us. Everyone on the attendees, thank you for joining us. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Go to cernasolutions.com. If you want to see more podcasts like this, go to like us or follow us on LinkedIn. Go to our YouTube page. Like us, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications of when these come out. And we really appreciate it every single time. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Ah.